We all know that when you donate to charity in Canada, you get a little something back on your taxes, right? A tax credit. It's supposed to reward you for being generous. But what if I told you that for decades, that whole system, well, it might have been missing the point entirely, and not in the way you'd think? That's what we're digging into today.
So here's the real question, the one that really matters. Does that credit actually make us give more, or is it just a nice little perk we get for doing something we were going to do anyway? I mean, the answer has massive consequences for charities all over the country.
Well, that's exactly what a group of Canadian economists wanted to figure out. So they rolled up their sleeves and dug into decades of our tax data, just hunting for clues. And honestly, what they found is a real head-scratcher. It kind of flips a lot of our assumptions about generosity on their head.
Okay, so before we get to the big reveal, we've got to understand the system they were looking at. So let's do a quick breakdown of how Canada actually encourages us to give to charity. And believe me, it's got a bit of a history, and it's not as simple as you might think.
You know, this whole idea of getting a tax break for donating, it's been around for over 100 years. It actually started way back in 1917 as a deduction to help with the war effort. But the really big shift, the one that changes everything for our story, happened in 1988. That's the year we switched from a tax deduction to a tax credit. And trust me, that distinction is everything.
So, deduction, credit, what's the difference, right? Well, think about it like this. A deduction lowers your taxable income. So if you're in a high tax bracket, that deduction is worth more to you. It's kind of tilted in favor of high earners. But a credit is different. It's a straight-up reduction of the tax you owe. It's like a coupon. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, that coupon is worth the exact same amount to everybody. And that's why that switch was such a big deal. It was all about making the system fairer.
And that 1988 change brought in the system we still have today, which is this weird two-tiered thing. Here's how it works. For the first $200 you donate, you get a certain level of tax credit back. But, and this is the key part, for every single dollar you donate above that $200 mark, the credit gets way, way better. The thinking was pretty obvious, right? They wanted to encourage people to make bigger donations. But, and you can probably guess where this is going, it had some effects nobody really saw coming.
All right, so the system is designed to get us all giving more. But when the economists started crunching the numbers, they noticed something was going wrong.
So, is it working? Is this system doing its job? Well, the data shows this strange paradox. The total amount of money being donated isn't really falling off a cliff, but the number of people doing the donating, that's shrinking fast. And this leads to something the researchers call concentrated generosity. Basically, charities are becoming more and more dependent on a smaller and smaller group of people.
Yeah, just look at this graph right here. It shows the percentage of Canadian households that claim the donation tax credit. And, well, the trend line is pretty clear, and it's not going in the right direction. It's a steady decline. In just 8 years, from 2010 to 2018, the number of households donating dropped by about 7%. Fewer and fewer of us are giving each year. And this isn't just some abstract statistic, right? The researchers themselves called this trend alarming, and you can totally see why. When your donor base shrinks, you become incredibly vulnerable. You're relying on the goodwill of a tiny, concentrated group of people.
And this chart, wow, it really shows you who that small group is. The difference is just staggering. Look at the average donation from the top 10% of earners compared to everyone else, the other 90%. It's not even close. In fact, the research shows that pretty much any change in total donations, up or down, is basically being driven by the choices of that top group.
Okay, so let's recap the puzzle here. We've got fewer people donating overall, but a massive amount of money coming from a tiny group at the top. So that leads us to the big, juicy question at the center of this whole thing.
Who does the tax credit actually influence the most? Now, if you're like me, your gut probably says it's the wealthy donors, right? I mean, they're the ones giving enough to get that much better credit rate. It just makes sense. Except, the data says something completely different. Something that is, honestly, pretty shocking.
Okay, this chart right here, this is the mic drop moment of the whole study. It shows how responsive different income groups are to the tax credit. And just look at it. That bar on the left, that's the lowest 20% of earners. It absolutely dwarfs the others. What this means is that lower income households are incredibly sensitive to the tax credit. Make it just a little bit better for them, and they donate a lot more. It's not even a contest. They are, by far, the group most influenced by this policy.
So what does responsive even mean here? Well, the fancy economics term is tax price elasticity. Sounds super complicated, but it's really not. Just think of the tax credit as a discount on donating. So an elasticity of -1 means if the discount gets 1% better, you donate 1% more. It's a direct response. But an elasticity of -4, which is what they found for lower-income households, that's a huge response. It means for every 1% discount they get, they turn around and increase their donations by 4%.
So let's just let that sink in. This is the key takeaway. Yes, the wealthy give the most money in total dollars, but it's the lower-income households whose actual behavior, their decision to give, and how much is most affected by the tax credit. A tiny tweak to the system for them leads to a massive change in their generosity.
So once you know that, it changes everything. And this wild discovery led the researchers to a really powerful conclusion and a bold suggestion for how to fix the system.
What do they suggest? It's simple, but it's also kind of radical. They say we should just scrap the $200 threshold altogether. Get rid of it. Their argument is that this whole two-tiered system is actually creating the wrong kinds of incentives and might even be discouraging people from giving.
So let's compare, right? The system we have now is, well, it's complicated. And because it gives you a worse rate on your first $200, it basically puts a higher price on those first few dollars of giving. The researchers think this forces charities to focus all their energy on finding those whale donors who can easily give more than $200. But a simple single-rate system, well, it treats every dollar the same. The first dollar you give is just as valuable as the thousandth. It sends a powerful message that every donation matters.
And if we made that change, the potential upsides are huge. A single-rate system isn't just simpler and fairer, it could be the key to turning that scary trend around. You know, the one with fewer people donating? By making those first few dollars count for more, you might actually get more people to start giving in the first place. And it would totally change the game for charities, encouraging them to value a $5 donor just as much as a $5,000 donor.
So it all comes down to this really fascinating final thought. We're always trying to figure out these big, complicated ways to make people more generous. But what if this research is telling us that the answer isn't some big marketing campaign? What if it's just a simple, smart change to the tax code? Maybe the way to a more generous Canada isn't about guilt-tripping people into giving more, but about building a system that's just fundamentally fairer for everyone who wants to help.